Solar power has made slow but steady progress as a clean energy alternative in Europe and North America. However, the more impressive results are coming from solar systems being installed as part of a first step in infrastructure development among emerging economies and underserved communities.
In many of the countries that we work in, whether that's in sub-Saharan Africa, in Haiti, and other developing countries, the governments haven't done a good job in ensuring that the entire population has access to energy, reliable energy, as well as clean water infrastructure.
Job training and education in a place where there are no jobs and economic activity often doesn't get used very well. It doesn't get utilized because there isn't a job to absorb that educated student afterwards. The same way food and water and healthcare, if you don't have access to basic food and water, then more advanced healthcare, doctor's visits, pharmaceuticals, they all seem kind of a cart ahead of the horse.
My name is Jim Connor. Welcome to Game Changers Silicon Valley. Tonight's show is about how social capital is being applied to underserved markets to create a business infrastructure that delivers value to the community and creates jobs. My guests are Jim Chu, founder of Untapped, who has developed a process to jumpstart economic development in emerging economies, and Barrett Raftery, executive director of Give Power, which provides solar power generating stations as the starting point for economic self-sufficiency. Jim and Barrett, welcome to the show. Jim, you have several years of experience working in different areas of the world helping economies emerge. Can you give us a conceptual overview of what you're doing now with Untapped?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on the show. I really appreciate the opportunity. Untapped is a social business that focuses on deploying and managing decentralized infrastructure for energy and clean water in developing countries. We build off-grid systems to ensure that underserved communities have access to clean water in the hardest to reach areas in developing countries.
How do you build this? You do it with the power project first and then get the water, or is there a step?
Well, so clean water, that's a great question. Clean water is essentially energy. You need energy in order to treat water, especially in areas where the water is especially contaminated. So having an energy source, an off-grid energy source, is essential in areas where you don't have the infrastructure. In many of the countries that we work in, whether that's in sub-Saharan Africa, in Haiti, and other developing countries, the governments haven't done a good job in ensuring that the entire population has access to energy, reliable energy, as well as clean water infrastructure. So the starting point really is energy. And so we build essentially solar off-grid systems in order to power the water systems.
So Barrett, your organization started by producing or delivering solar power systems to schools, as I understand it, and you've also done a lot of work in the area of disaster relief or addressing natural disasters. Can you give us an overview how your organization came to have this focus?
Thanks again for having me, Jim.
Sure.
It really started because Give Power is a corporate social responsibility nonprofit. So what we really began with was, what projects do our corporate donors get really interested in? And so having dollar to metric impacts, like for every target that's hit, another school gets power, or disaster relief campaigns, which have always been something that large organizations can get passionate about because the members of the organization, the employee, want to do something. So those were really the origin projects. We started within Solar City about 5 years ago, and at that time we did 2,500 schools, as you mentioned, to match the 2,500 megawatts of solar put in by Solar City. So it was a matching program with one of our corporate partners. And then we also did solar-powered disaster response for hurricanes. Most recently, we've been active in Puerto Rico, and we provided energy and water systems there in response to Hurricane Maria last year.
Is it individual? I mean, you're going to individual communities, or are you doing a little broader approach?
So we've done a lot of different scales of impact. So we've done larger solar systems at firehouses where we could enable community services and the access of emergency support. And then we've also done community centers. But on the water level, we've done individual water filters so that we could get into the households. Because in Puerto Rico, people had access to dirty water, but the tap water wasn't clean. So it was about getting that last filtration step into the household before they drank.
Is that part of the last mile concept?
It is. It's directly part of the last mile concept. Often in disasters, it's our distribution systems that break down. And last mile really is referring to customers or recipients that don't have access to distribution.
So Jim, in our earlier conversation, I got the understanding or the sense that you're taking a pretty broad level of responsibility. You're attempting to put in the off-grid or the electrical power system and create clean water and support the economic development of the distribution of the clean water. What kind of duration and how much commitment do you have to take these projects on?
Well, I think it's important to note that the power systems that we put in place are primarily, first and foremost, to power our water systems. And so as we do that, we do realize that there is efficiency in larger scale systems and therefore are able to provide excess energy to others. But it's primarily there to power our water systems. But once we do that, what we're essentially creating is some of the infrastructure to distribute water to households as well. And so when you solve the problem of getting water to people, you end up along the way solving many other problems. How do you find power? How do you actually get it into people's hands in a convenient way, in a cost-effective way? And so by doing all those things, we're essentially driving a lot of economic development activities, such as enabling small retailers to finance their inventory. And so it's a byproduct, if you will, of getting water to as many people as possible.
What areas of the world are you active in at this time?
We started off in Haiti in 2013. I was a volunteer in Haiti after the earthquake in 2010, and I quickly realized that we needed a business-focused approach to addressing the problem. We created the model there and really fine-tuned the model in Haiti, but now are taking the model to mostly sub-Saharan Africa, where essentially in places where there isn't substantial infrastructure for energy and clean water.
You focused on schools and disaster relief, and you've been in mainly Central America and the Caribbean, or you've been much further out?
So Give Power has power systems active in 19 countries right now.
19 countries?
Yeah.
Wow.
Majority of them are in sub-Saharan Africa. And then we also have Asia, Latin America, and then Central America and Caribbean. And we're active on 3 Native American reservations, Northern Cheyenne, Navajo, and Standing Rock Sioux.
So what happens after you provide water to them? What's the next step?
Well, I think we look at a kind of holistic group of social services that are needed to create better outcomes for quality of life. For example, job training and education in a place where there are no jobs and economic activity often doesn't get used very well. It doesn't get utilized because there isn't a job to absorb that educated student afterwards. The same way food and water and healthcare, if you don't have access to basic food and water, then more advanced healthcare, doctor's visits, pharmaceuticals, they all seem kind of a cart ahead of the horse. So what we really think about is how can we leverage a power asset, solar plus batteries, in a place where there is no access to electricity, to create access to as many social services as possible.
And you sponsor all of them?
We look for local operators, and then we basically augment their capacity with power engineering and finance that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
Do you do a similar approach? You look for local operators and then sponsor them in, or do you try to drive this yourself?
So our approach is some of the same principles, yes, but we are a for-profit business, a social business. But because of that, our models are a little bit less about giving things away and a bit more about how do you create an economically sustainable model. But in principle, localizing the responsibility of systems is critical. Because at the end of the day, it's the local folks who know how to deal and run things in their communities. Our job really is just to give them the tools to do that in a more efficient way, whether that's providing them the credit for financing the systems, the technical support so they can run the systems long term. We see that as our job.
So a for-profit social enterprise, can you explain that?
You know, one of the reasons I started this company was as a volunteer in Haiti, I saw a lot of the issues with systemic issues with aid. Aid was in many cases not solving the problem, or in other cases even making the problem worse by perpetuating some of the issues. So I, perhaps naively, perhaps arrogantly, thought the business could do a better job at it. And so we took a very market-based, business-led approach. I got investors, we connected with the IFC, which is the World Bank, and got some other investors involved to launch a company to do this. However, the mission of the company is still very social. How do we provide infrastructure for the most underserved communities?
You have a set of primary corporate sponsors then who fund this operation, correct?
Correct.
Is it mainly solar power, Solar City?
Solar City, it's a variety of corporate partners. We've diversified over the years. We did start incubated in Solar City. But I think one thing that's important to note about Give Power is we are a revenue generating nonprofit. So we do charge for our services to the end user at a locally affordable rate to support the operations staff locally. So although we are a nonprofit, I don't think we're a traditional nonprofit in that we do create a financial relationship with our end user.
What type of corporations, let you speak about it, participate in this program?
So we've had mostly energy and finance corporations participate. Our founding member was Solar City, and then our largest recurring donor is Bank of America Foundation. And then we've also worked with a couple other major solar players, such as Cypress Creek Renewables and Tesla. And they've all participated in different ways. I think because we started from a nonprofit position, not a for-profit, one of the things is that all of these companies realize they have a huge capacity to do things for the less fortunate and for people in emerging markets that isn't going to fit in their core bottom line business. I believe all of the corporations that we work with have a genuine desire to make the world a better place.
And there's one thing that I noticed that was really unique about your project, I think, is that you allow the employees of the corporation, sponsoring corporation, to participate in the implementation.
Correct. Working in developing markets has always been a process of connecting with people's hearts. And often for people in America, it's very difficult to visualize the life circumstance of someone that lives so far away, or to see past media images into what life actually looks like in many of these places. We try to share, and that with a fairly limited amount of resources, these companies and their employees have been able to make a difference in hundreds of thousands of people's lives.
So Jim, on your side, you've raised money from investors, correct? And do they expect a payback at some point, or they pretty much have donated that?
No, they do expect a payback, and some people call it concessionary finance. But I think the distinction between a business with a social mission and, let's say, a nonprofit with a revenue stream, sometimes it's about culture and it's about approach. I often say that the traditional NGO has two customers, the folks that give them the money and the folks that they're trying to serve. And oftentimes, trying to serve both can be problematic. But I think if you can align the approach where creating value for those who you're serving, the customer in our case, if that's a primary value and doing it in a market-driven way, it's not that different whether you call yourself a nonprofit or a for-profit.
How do you queue up your next project? Do you have a planning board? Is it a one-year project, a planning process? How do you decide the next thing that you're going to do?
Well, a lot of it is about where we see the both social impact and economic opportunity. We see a tremendous need in sub-Saharan Africa. We created this model really to serve that, but Africa will be adding another 1 billion people in the next 30 years, and the business as usual, top-down, government-driven models for serving them aren't going to work. And so we're moving aggressively into Africa because we see that huge need there. But also, if you look at the economic opportunity, it's pretty tremendous. There's $1 trillion spent by poor consumers earning less than $5 a day. And so if we can improve how services are being delivered to those consumers, that's also an economic opportunity as well as a humanitarian one.
It sounds like you see sub-Saharan Africa as also the primary hotspot for your services. Is that correct?
It's pretty diverse, really.
Yes. Okay.
We use source water from the ocean.
That's right. Your desalinization process, correct?
Yes, we're more of a so at least on the water project side, we're more limited in our site selection to coastal communities or those that have some access to the sea.
Okay.
Our electricity projects, when we do pure power without water desalination, we have a broader reach. But we're really focused as kind of this subtle difference between for-profit and nonprofit business, always on where's the greatest impact. So we're looking for water scarcity, we're looking for abnormally high water demand problems. This tends to put us in post-conflict zones or regions that really have poor infrastructure, exceptionally so. There's possibly better market opportunities with a more stable marketplace that's willing to pay a higher price, but we've really focused on communities that have absolutely no impact or some level of insecurity based on lack of water.
I'll take a minute or two. I'd like to know how you woke up one day and decided you wanted to pursue this type of work.
No, that's a great question. Most of my career, I spent 20 years in technology, and in fact, probably most of your listeners, similar background. I was at Stanford for undergrad and graduate in the 1990s, early 90s, and worked at Cisco and some other companies before running some small startups. But getting to where I am today was really quite accidental. I was a volunteer in Haiti after the 2010 earthquake, and I just found that so much of the skills that I developed in the private sector were underutilized but far more impactful in the international development sector. And so I've been doing this now for 8 years, but really using all the skills that I developed when I was in the corporate world.
And did you happen to have the vision you were going to end up in this type of work, or did you fall into it also?
I was asked to help put solar on a school in Kenya in 2007, just not too far from here in Los Altos. I had a friend from Los Altos, and he was a Kenyan gentleman, and he wrote a children's book about 9/11 called 14 Cows for America. And with that, he raised a sum of money, and he didn't want to take it for himself. He didn't feel it was appropriate. So we built and solar-powered schools in Kenya between 2007 and 2009. And then just starting with these, very simple NGO projects to provide power to remote locations, I started thinking about, is the school the best place to power it, and what are we going to power in the school? And then we, kind of started a decade-long learning experience that led to where we are now with multifunctional microgrids.
You both have expressed such a commitment. I have the impression that this is what you want to do with your life, your careers. Is that an accurate statement?
Absolutely. I feel so much more purpose in what I do today than when I would sell things to kids on the internet, or when I sold services on routers and switches. Not to say those are not useful things, but I find what I do much more rewarding. I think one of the light bulb experiences I had was when so we employ over 100 people in Haiti, and I think this was the second year that we had a big Christmas party for everybody. And I realized that everybody at that Christmas party was able to eat and live their lives because of this job. Because in all of these areas, it's 80+% unemployment. And so by simply giving people a job that they're proud of serving the community, that had an incredible impact on economic development and their lives.
Very good. And so you had a similar commitment. If you had the choice of doing anything, it sounds like you would stay with what you're doing now.
Yeah, I've kind of joked with my friends for some time that it's just convenient they pay me to do this. Otherwise, I'd still be doing it and I just wouldn't get paid for it. So I think any time that you can help others as a form of vocation is really quite exceptional.
Great. Well, you both have been terrific guests. I want to say I really enjoyed this conversation very much. It's been very insightful, and you brought up some images that I had probably looked beyond. It reminded me, there's a pretty troubled world out there, and people have a lot of issues, and maybe we can all do something about it. So let's, I'll ask you to give some information if people would like to follow up with you, contact your organization, or contact you directly. I'll start with you, Jim.
Sure. They can find out more about the organization at untapped-inc.com, as well as emailing me directly at jim@untappedinc.com.
And you have the special Haiti organization also.
And we also have the Haiti operation, which is dlohaiti.com.
And Barrett, your contact information?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You can find out more about my organization at givepower.org, and I'm Barrett at givepower.org.
Once again, I want to thank you both. You've been just wonderful guests, so insightful, and I want to wish both of you the best going forward, and look forward to every success coming your way.
And to you,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is Jim Connor. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Game Changer Silicon Valley. Each week, we'll address an area of innovation that may emerge as a game changer of tomorrow. You can follow us by clicking on this Game Changers icon, or subscribe to the show at gamechangers.tv. We look forward to your continued interest and participation in upcoming shows.